Well, thank you everybody for being here this evening. Today is Thursday, February 18th, and we're meeting as the District Advisory Building Committee for Portland Public Schools, and we're meeting via Zoom. And we'll first start with roll call. I don't know, Javier, if Steve, could you please take attendance? I don't see Doug. That would be great. So taking attendance, Jessica Marino.
Here.
Emily Figdor.
Here.
Matt Winch.
Here.
Or Russell Better.
Here.
Councilor Ray.
Here.
Okay. Brad Post. Brad, I see you. Okay. Jay Norris.
Here.
Welcome. Paul Stevens.
Here.
Okay. Abigail Fuller. Okay. And my co-chair, Councilor Dion.
Here.
All righty. We also have present with us our facilities director, Mr. Stephen Stilfen, and our superintendent, Javier Botana, and our, oh, there's Doug. And Doug Stewart also joined us. He's with our facilities group at Portland Public Schools.
Hey, Doug.
Well, welcome. So our first item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes for the DABC meeting for January 21st. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Okay. Who was that? I'm sorry. Jay, was that you?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Jay. And then seconded by Ms. Figdor. Thank you. Are there any questions on the meeting minutes? Any errors or omissions? Okay. Seeing none, with a show of hands, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes for January 21st, please indicate. Okay, it's unanimous with all those present. Thank you very much. And we will be kicking it off the agenda this evening. Let's see here, sorry. I'm not a board docs whiz, so the meeting this evening, let's see here. So review of the agenda, we have a Lyseth update, Longfellow, Presumpscot, Reiki, and then we're going to go over the 3-school project budget and some commissioning and Longfellow bid next steps. So we have quite a hefty agenda. So I want to make sure that we leave plenty of times for a question. If you have a question, if you could just please use the raise your hand function, and I'll call on you. If I miss anything, I'm sure Javier will let me know. With that said, I'll turn it over to the team from Harriman. Mark Lee.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on what is school vacation week. So how quickly it went by. It's Thursday night and already. As Ms. Thompson said, we've got a fairly decent amount of material to go over, so we'll try to be efficient and allow enough time for comments. And as usual, I usually move too quickly from topic to topic, and so please interrupt me, and we'll pause to make sure that we have time to answer any questions on the various topics we're covering tonight.
Mark, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Did we let the public in? Because I know that I got some emails, Javier. I just want to make sure that the attendees are let in, because it shows 0, so I don't know if there's anybody sitting there, but
they should be able to come in.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry about that, Mark. Go ahead.
No problem. No, thank you. So a quick update on Lyseth. I think the last meeting we had the video that provided an update on the construction and where things were, and that was nice to see. And so we right now the current activities are finalizing the furniture selection for the kindergarten wing, and there's been some meetings on that, and we're preparing the bid documents for the furniture solicitation. That's coming along nicely, and as I think it was experienced, it was like, I don't know if kids in a candy store was the right terminology, but the teachers were very excited to have the opportunity to select new furniture for their rooms, and so pretty exciting. They were thrilled to have the opportunity to input, and so that's moving forward. The other thing we did was we received the official certificate of occupancy from the city, and so that just makes it official that they've looked at it and feel it's safe to occupy. So gives the green light for the staff to go in and students to occupy the new spaces in the kindergarten wing. So that's a milestone as well. And lastly, we're right now kind of in a phase of preparing for the next portion of the renovation. And that's the piece that's going to occur this summer. So as soon as school gets out, they'll get in there and do the last phase of the Lyseth project. So the pain of most of the construction is nearly past. We have just this one final phase, 3B, which comprises mostly of the corridors, spaces, and there's a few rooms that exist along the primary corridor, but they're mostly towards the back portion of the building. So that's exciting. In fact, today there was a meeting on site this morning with the contractors that look at the hazardous material that needs to be removed from the school, and so that was one of the last remaining pieces as we gear up for the final construction phase. Any questions on the Lyseth update? All right, and so next is the Longfellow. The first, as we've been talking about, Longfellow is the next project that goes out, or the first project that goes out to bid, and that's nearly imminent. We're in the middle of February right now, and so there's a couple weeks before the bid documents go out to the contractors for pricing. So a couple important aspects of that we wanted to bring everyone up to speed on. One is sort of updates on the alternates. There were a couple of modifications dealing with the HVAC and the windows. So one of the alternates that we had was the electronic digital controls for the mechanical units, and it was sort of a redundant option because we also had in alternates for new HVAC systems, and so this was the prior list, and so it had the new HVAC systems as ranked as the first one. Modifications to the large windows to make them easier to operate for the teachers, new unit ventilators, and so the 1 and 3 are new mechanical equipment in the building, and we also had number 6, which was the digital controls that essentially control the mechanical equipment. So, but what we in further review, any new equipment, the new unit ventilators or the new HVAC systems will come already with the electronic controls, and so it's redundant to say we want to add controls if we're taking the alternates to replace the equipment anyway. So we've modified those two, and as had been reported as part of the COVID preparations, there was already modifications made to the windows to make them operable to allow fresh air, and that was done prior to the opening of the schools in the fall. The other updates, though, that we have, the big one that we have and we bring everyone's attention to is number 8, which simply we put it at the end of the list, and that's the kitchen cafeteria. And as we've been kind of, it's been a subtle intimation at a few of the meetings to say that we were hopeful early on, and I say early on, it was probably in the design development phase when we realized the abatement costs weren't going to be as much as we thought they were, that we then went forward and added on square footage for the pre-kindergarten classroom, a couple of the specials rooms, and then the kitchen, a separate kitchen cafeteria. That was added on from our previous scope resolution, which was the classroom option, where we looked at our budgets and didn't think we had enough to add the separate cafeteria and kitchen, but we were hopeful that we would be able to. We started designing it. We've got more recent numbers in, and the costs exceed our budget, and so we have now priced that as an alternate. And so what that looks like is that the base bid includes the, and this zone right here, I think everyone can see my cursor, has the green tone, which is the reading and the ELL and gifted and talented rooms, those specials which we're moving out of the area which is blue, the toilet rooms. And so those are the new construction that we've been talking about, the addition for those. And a stair that goes up and down from the first floor to the lower level. But the expansion of the cafeteria and kitchen and a series of associated support spaces, including storage. There's an IT closet in that zone right there, and a mechanical mezzanine on top of it. That is now identified as an alternate. And so and the value of that alternate is fairly significant. And so just to give you a rough order of what the costs are of these items, right now our budget, as I think we all know, is about $10.5 million. That's our what's been allocated for the Longfellow project. The total that that our most recent cost estimation came back in was $13.8 million. So it was a significant amount over, and that breaks down roughly to about $7.5 million for the renovation work, and it was $6.3 million for the additions. And that includes not only the addition on the back that we're talking about, all the associated site work, retaining wall replacement, and the elevator that goes into. Those are really the crux of the new work, or the new additions to the building. The kitchen cafeteria is about $3.8 million of that total amount. So taking that out, we're right around just a little over the 10 million mark on our estimate. And so it's a significant amount. I don't want to suggest to anyone that we think that that there's a probability that will be awarded. The likelihood that we're going to somehow come up with $3 million in a low bid in order to be able to award that alternate is not very likely. So we want it to be, but the design is done. We included it as a pricing exercise for the contractors, not knowing again where all of the budget pricing might come for all the different schools. And so it's helpful information to have. And also, if it doesn't come about in the BFOF budget because of the funds that we have available, then the information will have, it'll provide the school district with at least an understanding of what a real cost in 2021 for that piece is. So you'll have a very clear understanding of what that component is. And we have had a conversation just to let the chairs of the BLAC know that is the case, that our most recent estimate is included this as an alternate to the base bid. But we have more work to communicate this to the rest of the constituents and stakeholders for the Longfellow School. So I'll pause here before I move through the rest of the floor plans.
Any questions? Okay, Councilor Ray? Should I come?
There we go. Thank you. I was really happy to see that you were able to use CARES Act funding to assist with the windows at Longfellow. And I was just wondering if there were other issues like windows or ventilation at any of the schools in this plan or other schools in the system that could also be addressed with any future or existing CARES Act funding to help with capital costs?
We did a significant number of ventilation upgrades throughout the district this fall in order to be able to reopen school. I think you joined us after Steve had already talked about the fact that he was up on the roof at Reiki today with some additional work that is currently going on over there for ventilation. But, we also repaired the windows at Deering and Portland High School, as well as at Talbot. So we've done a significant number of those types of, things that the CRF funding had to be specifically COVID related. So these were things that we needed to do because of COVID, and that, so it wasn't money that we could just use to do repairs. It had to be directly related to COVID. So I think that's the general sum of the things that we did. I don't know if I left anything out, Steve, that you would want to highlight.
Steve, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I can only add that not only did we repair, like from balances in Longfellow, but any window that wasn't operable or could be repaired, we replaced over close to 300 windows throughout those 4 different schools. So there are new windows involved as well as repair of windows. But there's always opportunity, as Javier outlined here, in the Connectivity to CARES Act is distinctive prior in the last amount of money, but we can easily identify rooftop replacements throughout the district that if there's a different connection to the money outside of COVID, if it's just general ventilation, as you hear talked about in opening schools, I don't know what that will look like, but if there was an opportunity to access those funds, we have a pretty good list of old, aged, worn out rooftops in a number of schools.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Javier. And I know you've done a lot already. I guess I was hopeful that there might be, anything else in the plans for the 3 remaining schools that we could potentially chip away at because it would be associated with improving ventilation or doing something COVID related. And if we could, then that could potentially reduce the costs and help us get more out of this bond money than, the most out of the bond money. So that was all. But I know you've done a lot, and thank you very much.
Councillor Ray, Doug Sherwood, good evening. I just also wanted to highlight that we added ionizers to all of our mechanical systems to improve air quality. And then doing that, we also cleaned all our unit ventilators and upgraded or updated motors and shafts and that sort of thing. And Longfellow was one of those beneficiaries, and Reiki as well. So some of those alternates we're looking at, we've already tackled, just like the windows.
And can I just add too, just to that, it's specific to Longfellow, to clear up a little bit about digital controls and unit ventilators. The unit ventilators in Longfellow, if they're not the new that will go in, will be digitally controlled. We repaired and changed the thermostatic controls, although they remain air or pneumatic controls. They're still sensitive and operationally they're in great condition. So if you set the thermostat to 72, you should get 72 in your room, although it's air that's driving it rather than electronics.
That's great. And I think probably you've already answered my question, but just so I make sure that I understand, did any of this complete anything that we were planning to do as part of the bond package? So did any of these things that have been done for COVID with CARES Act or other money cut down the costs of the bond package at all, the schools that we have remaining to do?
That's a tough question. So, as we just mentioned, those windows are in that plan as an alternate. So something that we would be able to do if the bids came in lower, that would not be needed. So, there's a list of alternates, as you saw. And, the second one, I think, is those windows. Those windows we won't need to do, so that alternate is out. But, so it doesn't really help the budget per se, because that's not currently in the budget. That would be something we would add if the bids came in lower, but we will do it regardless of whether it will be done regardless of whether the bids come in or not. Similarly, some of what is happening over at Reiki now with the, and I don't understand it well enough, but Steve can share additional details. That's work that would have needed to happen as part of the construction. So that will already have been done because of the COVID funding.
Are you all set, Counselor? Thank you. Jess Marino?
Hi. So, Mark, can I just clarify? Can you go back to the floor plan? So in green, the part that you've kept is the pre-K rooms and like the specialist rooms that were on the second floor. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. And then, so why is the kitchen listed as number 8 on the alternates? Is that did the BLAC determine that, or is that just where you're placing it because it's like realistically off the table?
No, they're only because we haven't had an opportunity to review where that would fall in context with the BLAC. So the information just hasn't been reviewed with them. So we've identified it. In fact, probably we could put no number next to it right now, just so that because it hasn't had an exercise of reviewing its relative priority.
And if we don't do the kitchen, realistically, does that mean there would potentially be money to do something like the mechanical system upgrade for the H?
Yeah, potentially that's correct, because as I suggested, right now we're the estimate was just over the $10 million mark, and so we have about $500,000 or a little under $500,000 before the $10.5 million budget line that we've carried for Longfellow. So yes, there potentially would be funds to award alternates.
Okay, thanks.
Said Jess. Oh. Okay. Moving on to board member Figdor.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Thompson. I'm wondering if, first I think that it's so exciting to be so close to sending these projects to bid. And of course, we've had our share of hiccups along the road, which is only to be expected. But I'm wondering if the cost estimates coming in higher than we had anticipated, we anticipate seeing with the other 2 projects as well.
Yeah, so we built in some of the cost escalation in this most recent round of pricing for all of the schools. So we did the same cost exercise. This is the one that was the most, that had the sort of aspect of the most overrun on that. So that was a scope item that it was in addition to just updating the pricing, it was also because the design further evolved, and the need to redo the retaining wall and a significant amount of site work that was associated with it. Also, as we got into the kitchen equipment and the layout for that and the space requirements for that, all those sort of compounded to expand what we had hoped would be a fairly modest addition for the cafeteria and kitchen. It sort of grew in complexity, and that added cost as well.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful context.
Also, what we've tried to do is be very careful about the design of the base bid, so that at any time the expansion of the cafeteria and kitchen could occur, that we haven't done anything that would preclude the opportunity to add it in the future.
All set? Okay. Thank you.
So,
Mark, go ahead.
Yep, very good. Thank you. So the main level or the first floor is still relatively the same as we have shared it in the past. The only very small alteration that we've done is in looking at the elevator and having to look at how to get in and out of it. We have a little vestibule area that you can see now that allows the stretcher to come in from the side. In fact, there's a very, very faint dash of sort of a gurney or stretcher, and how it would rotate into that vestibule and into the elevator itself. So that's grown slightly by the addition of that elevator itself. But by and large, the rest of the floor plan really hasn't changed from our original concept of those spaces and the layout of those spaces. And then the upper level, again, the same thing, that it's the same basic layout, with the exception of the elevator has changed with the expansion of that vestibule area. What it also allowed us to do is to, instead of having to buy a much larger elevator cab with doors on 90-degree sides, the elevator is a simpler, more cost-effective one, where the door is on the same side on every stop coming out to the vestibule, and the vestibule allows access from either the bottom of the page in this case, or in the previous slide from the left-hand side of the page. So that's one way of doing it with a simplified approach to the elevator model. So I'll pause there. Again, I think everyone at this committee level has is familiar enough with the plan. So those plans are what we've been detailing and are in the final stages of getting all the information on the contract documents for the bid. What we're also doing is going through the permitting process right now, and there's a planning board workshop scheduled for February 23rd, so that's coming right up next week, and it's the same date we have a school board presentation as well to look at the first reading of the language to permit us to go out to bid and to bring the school board up to speed on the project. We have received comments back from the planning board. There's nothing too significant. We're going through all those comments right now just to ensure that we've got all our I's dotted and T's crossed, and so we then that workshop will be for the conditional use permit only. So we'll look at that piece, but they'll have the first opportunity to look at the planning board to look at the project itself and to ask any questions of it. But the full site plan review will happen at the following meeting. And I believe, I don't have the date of that right off the top of my head, but, and so at the following meeting is when it will be, have the formal public hearing for it and the vote on the approval of the project. So that's from the planning board side. So that will put us in good position again to have the planning board approvals as we move forward to the bidding of the project. Moving on to the Presumpscot update, we originally had the planning board workshop scheduled for the 23rd as well, and it was going to be they had an opening come up, and it was for the conditional use permit only. Again, very similar to we were going to be doing Longfellow and Presumpscot on the same night. Very recently, in the last day or so, we've had a notification that there was a mix-up with the notice to the public, and so the conditional use workshop will move to the night that we're getting the public hearing for the Longfellow. So it's shifting by one cycle on the planning side of it. So that's still in plenty of time for us as we move forward. Presumpscot, as everyone will remember, is the one that actually bids third. And so the reason we went with that one next, when the planning board or the planning department called and said, hey, we've got some opening, it was just that one was further along in terms of the pieces that needed to be reviewed for the application. And so that slid in there, but we're still moving forward with the Reiki project as well through the planning department. And the Reiki update, we had conversation with the building level advisory committee on the different options for the element in the front. We looked at a range of images for the context of the addition. And right now, the most recent conversation is to price it to see what its impact is and whether those funds are better spent inside the building, but there were a number of conversations. I think there was, and Emily can sort of chime in with some of the reaction, but some of the reaction was it was positive and thought it was a nice element, and others were not in favor of keeping it and wanted us to go back to the drawing board. One of the considerations that was, I think, helpful was that without it, if we just looked at the addition and the canopy as shown here, to potentially put in a skylight in the canopy so that it actually gets a fair amount of natural light at the entrance door, so it doesn't feel like a dark pocket when you go under it. And that was something we thought we could incorporate relatively easily into that design right there. So. And I'll pause for a moment if Emily has any other follow-up from our BLAC meeting.
Yeah, I think the feedback was very mixed. Some people feeling like the pergola structure added some kind of fun, youthful element, and others feeling like it was imposing and inconsistent with kind of the feel of the building and the neighborhood. So there's definitely not consensus, but I think people appreciate the opportunity to provide feedback, and the information about the pricing I think will be helpful in terms of contextualizing the decisions that we might be able to make in terms of prioritization.
Very good. The other thing that we're also looking at is there's a tree, you can see it in these two images here, that there's a strong desire to hold on to that tree. And so that was feedback we got through our workshopping with the greening committee. And so we went back, here it is as well. It's a beautiful mature tree. And so there was a lot of interest in preserving that oak. And so we went back to look at our plan and figure out a way of still providing some of the expanded access to the main entrance. So instead of we initially had the cutback going all the way over here, which would have been too close to the tree. And so we have shifted this curb line to here. You can see underneath, this is where the existing planter is, and that's where the tree is right there. So that you can see the outside of that canopy extending approximately to this location here. But we are going to protect it during the construction, and we have taken and made a new alignment with the path that comes from the side of the stairs over here and comes over to the front of the new entrance plaza. So that right there will make enough accommodation for that. We've identified some of the bench seating up along this edge right here, as was shown, and also providing a bench seating right here in the front as well. So then what most recently we've done too is look comprehensively at some of the line items and the total project budgets moving across all of the three schools, actually all the four schools. And so these again were I think everyone here will remember, this is our history of our project budget, and going all the way back to the original BFOF budgets and when we started Lyseth. And when we came up with the 1A scenario, we had identified the budget numbers that we're carrying now, the project budgets for Longfellow of 14, Presumpscot of 13, and Reiki of 21 million. And those totaled 48 million, and our project budget for Lyseth is at 16.8. So that put us at 64.8 million, which was over our total project budget by about $600,000. That, and those total project budgets were taking the construction cost estimates that we had and adding 25%, because that was what we had realized with the Lyseth, and which is a pretty typical what we call soft costs on the project budget, which is everything but the construction number. And so we went back to evaluate what all the line items that were established in the Oak Point, call it the BFOF budgets, and these budgets were the ones that were used to develop the bond. And so the construction number we revised, but we went through and looked at the line items of all the other soft costs, and this is way too small for you folks probably to read all those numbers, but the administrative costs are the second tier of costs, and they include movable equipment, which is based on a percent of the total construction cost, the advertising costs, and any legal costs. And then there's a project reserve number that we have for things that haven't been accounted for in it. And then the project contingency, which is a percentage of the construction cost. And that's at 10% of the construction cost. The furniture, the FFE, the furnishings and equipment, is 7% of the construction cost as well. So those numbers are variable depending on the construction cost. The architect fees, those were established at the time that we entered into a contract on these. And so those were locked in, and I'll show in the next slide. And then there are costs for the surveys, for soil testing, construction testing, and all those are in that C item in here, fees and services. The project representative, the owner's project representative, and then the clerk of the works are also carried in that cost as well. So then that was in 2017. In 2019, when we first established the contract, we established the project budgets as well, and they have a different form that was part of the contract that was used to enter into between the City of Portland, Portland Public Schools, and Harriman. And it is largely the same three tiers, are just broken out into slightly different forms. And so A in this one is the administrative, B is fees and services, and C is construction, this one. And so what we did most recently is we resolved those two different budgets with some of the costs that we now have built on the current construction values. And so this is the Longfellow budget. And so that was the 10.5 million for construction. The 7% on the movable equipment is both for technology as well as furniture. And then there's a $55,000 advertising and legal, and that is consistent with both the contract that we signed as well as with the Oak Point numbers. And then we have the project reserves, which is what was carried in the attachment D, which we're calling it, which is the previous budget we just looked at, the one that was included in our contract. And then hazardous material testing and lead registration. And so the hazardous material testing was identified as to be carried in the, it was not shown in the line, in a specific line item in the contract budget, but we made a note on the side to include it as part of the project reserves. And so that's why it's shown under 6 here on this page. And so right now we've carried $45,000 just for the testing. The actual abatement costs are in the construction number, in that 10.5 million. So this is just to identify the material that needs to be abated. And then we have the project contingency, which, as I said, is 10% of the total construction cost, or just over $1 million. The fees and services, those are all derived right from the contract budgets, and so those did not change at all. So that adds up to 13.980, which is about $20,000 below the total project budget that we established for Longfellow. So that's that 25% rule was almost right on with respect to after we reconciled all these different line items for the Longfellow budget. Likewise, we did it for the Presumpscot school, and taking the items, the same items that we looked at for Longfellow, we looked at it for Presumpscot and the original Oak Point values, and then the items that were identified during the contract budget that we developed, budget worksheet, and then same items are modified in purple here, and so that's the construction value, the movable equipment changing because of the construction value, the hazardous material testing as part of that project reserve category, lead registration, which wasn't carried anywhere. I also will note that the commissioning is shown down on line 17 of these, and again, that these may be too small. Hopefully you've got the material that was sent that you can look at, but the commissioning was not identified in the contract budget worksheet, but was identified in the Oak Point number. And so we did add it in here as line item 17 in these budgets. And that's the same on Longfellow and Presumpscot and Reiki. All of them are carrying a commissioning line item. So that's, as I said, that's new to this reconciled budget. It was carried in the original BFOF budget, so part of the reconciliation here. So this one, interesting again, comes out almost to the $13 million mark. It's about $13,000 below the $13 million mark here. So so that, again, that 25% soft cost is a very close approximation to this as well. The area where it didn't approximate the 25% was on the Reiki contract where some of the numbers that we're carrying down in the C column, they don't escalate at the same linear percentage. So it's not, in thinking about the fact that we're now looking, instead of around a $10 million construction, we're looking at a $15 million construction. Well, that increase of about 50% of those smaller construction amounts doesn't mean that all of the soils and testing and all those numbers increase by 50% as well. So there's actually a little more efficiency in the soft cost with this one and the larger construction amount, to the point where, as we add all those line items up, we're at 20.3 million. And so again, we haven't changed the construction value, but what we've done is adjusted the soft cost to come up with the total construction. And we had the difference there is we had 21 million originally budgeted built on that 25% over the 15.75. And so that $600,000 or almost $700,000 delta here essentially covered that the difference that we never accounted for, that $600,000 when we originally established the classroom 1A. As you remember, I started the slide identifying the fact that we had a deficit of $600,000 that we hadn't yet accounted for. And so the soft cost in going through this exercise accounted for the ability to reconcile that component as well. And so as we summarize what all of the values of these are, if we look at the Longfellow construction cost and then the project cost, and as we've just looked at on the reconciled budgets and Presumpscot and Reiki, the subtotal of the construction didn't change. The subtotal of the project cost was 47.2 million. And if we add in the Lyseth numbers, the total that we have for the construction is 50.1 million. The total for the project cost is 60.084 million, and our bond is 64.2 million. So right now, we have approximately a $175,000 reserve, or almost $176,000 reserve. So that just kind of gives you a snapshot right now where we are as we completed, reconciled the project budgets, getting ready to go into the final area of the bidding. Any questions on that? I'll pause here.
I don't see any, Mark. You keep going. Thank you.
Okay. Next piece, we talked just, I brought up the line item 17, which was commissioning. And as we did with the Lyseth project, we had a conversation with this group, as well as with the building level and advisory committee and the school board, on the cost for the commissioning itself and what the commissioning is and why we're carrying it. And so just a very quick conversation on the commissioning itself. The commissioning is a process where a third party comes in and reviews not only the design of certain building systems, but it also then follows through during the construction and startup of these building systems to confirm a couple things. One, that they are designed to operate or essentially to provide efficiency, that they're carefully considered in terms of the systems that are chosen and the performance of those systems, and ensuring that they're detailed correctly. Then the other thing that it does is, at the conclusion of the installation of these systems, it looks to optimize them for the best performance of the building. So oftentimes it's related to energy efficiency, but it also now includes other aspects of functioning. So the primary purpose is to ensure that it's not only detailed well, it's installed correctly, and that it's set up to run optimized for efficiency from day one. And most of the time, they do identify issues oftentimes with at the startup that have been aspects of the installation or and ensuring that they're addressed before the systems even get turned over to the owner. will say that the commissioning agent is hired by Portland Public Schools. They don't get hired by Harriman. They're hired by the school district, so that they're really looking out for the best interest of not only the system design, but also to ensure that you're when you take over these systems and have to pay for their operation and maintenance, that they're done so in a way that is the most efficient for you. And so there's been studies that have identified, in fact, that you can enhance or improve energy performance of a building anywhere from 8 to 30% by doing the commissioning process. And so, and the systems that we are seeing this most often in buildings are the mechanical systems. So all the air handling systems, the pumps that are associated with those, and all the motors that are regulating the flow of air and flow of fluids through a building, and also the controls that schedule the operation of all that equipment. So all of that is a big part of commissioning, and that's the sort of basis of it. It also includes things such as the lighting systems. Lighting systems now are all controlled either to take advantage of occupancy or lack of occupancy, and also daylighting conditions. And so the electrical systems, the lighting systems are included in the control. Plumbing systems, which kind of a subset of the mechanical systems, but the generation of hot water for domestic use, and any pumping systems. And then the other one that we're seeing more and more is the building envelope systems, which looks at the air vapor barrier that encloses the new additions to ensure that it is designed and installed correctly. And so that pays usually big dividends, and has been very helpful on the Lyseth project in identifying areas where the contractor needed to go back and tighten up areas of the installation. So the other thing on this is that we're seeing it also in security systems. And so with the most recent commissioning proposal, we also have included the security systems, because those have grown complex too, and they include interface with the access control, with cameras, and with alert buttons that gets distributed throughout the building itself, and a lot to do with doors and controlling doors when they close in the event of a security function. So that's another piece too. So the piece that isn't highlighted on these slides is that LEED actually requires, as a prerequisite for the certification, that we have the projects commissioned. And so we went out and solicited bids from firms that do commissioning and received those bids. And the same firm that did the Lyseth was the lowest responsible qualified contractor for the commissioning. So we have a proposal from them to do the commissioning for the next 3 schools, and so that is moving forward as well. Any questions on commissioning?
I had one question. Sorry. So is it at that the commissioning phase? Is that sort of the intersection where you might make a determination if some of the CARES funds could be utilized for ventilation or otherwise?
Yeah, I think, Brad, the commissioning agent will oftentimes, they will look at what has been selected for equipment. They won't necessarily propose new equipment, but what they will do is look at the equipment that has been selected by the design of record, the design engineer, and they'll make recommendations for optimizing that. So for instance, if we have an energy recovery ventilator specified, they may look at it to say that if a particular manufacturer is specified, are there alternate manufacturers that make a more efficient unit? And so they sort of fine tune it at that level. They wouldn't get to the point of saying, I think this is something you could use CARES Act funds for. I think that's something where we sort of have a conversation in what might be able to be funded with Steve and his group. And so, for instance, on the Reiki rooftop unit replacements, that was an item where we had coordinated. Steve had funds available to improve the air quality at Reiki, and the mechanical engineering team worked with Steve to understand how replacement of those units now would coordinate with the renovations that were being designed for Reiki. So, but the fine tuning of that is the equipment selection would be something commissioning agent would be involved in, but not necessarily recommendation to fund it through CARES Act. And did that answer it?
Yeah, I just wonder if there'd be an opportunity there to utilize anything, but it seems like the systems in place are a little disjointed and not very clear as to how to utilize those funds.
Yeah. Javier.
Okay. Mark, what would happen if I guess two questions. First, how much are we paying for commissioning altogether? And then what would happen if we didn't do it?
Good question. So we're paying $161,000 for the commissioning for the 3 schools. And there's a rule of thumb that it's approximately $1 a square foot for commissioning services. And so that's kind of a rule of thumb throughout the industry. And so there's, and we had budgeted through going back to the Oak Point budget, about $205,000 for that. So there's, it's roughly in line with what had been initially thought of. 2 parts. One, what would happen if we didn't commission them? So there's the one piece is that let's assume that we didn't need it for LEED. And so the building systems would be installed. They'd be identified as being installed per the contract documents by the engineer of record. So we would go through and say, yep, okay, you installed the system, and from everything we can see, it looks to be installed and operating. What we wouldn't do is test all the airflows and put it through a whole bunch of different scenarios to understand, is it responding correctly to all these different operation modes. And so so that optimization of the operation of the equipment, that optimization isn't something that the designer of record takes care of. So the idea is you may get all this equipment, but it may not be optimized to run as efficiently. So that's going back to that slide where it said anywhere between 8 and 30% more efficient operation by having the systems commissioned. So you'd actually, you potentially could have more operating costs than otherwise you'd have if you had the systems commissioned on the mechanical and energy side. The other thing is, though, we need it for the prerequisite for LEED. So without commissioning, we can't apply for the LEED certification, which is a requirement.
Is the LEED application is a requirement, or this is a requirement if we want to go for LEED?
So this is a requirement if we want to go for LEED. The green, as we know, the city's green building code requires it for Presumpscot and Longfellow. It does not require it, as we saw earlier, for Reiki, but we are pursuing LEED with all 3 schools. And so so that's something we've held consistently in moving forward with the LEED, and that's the process which Thornton Tomasetti has been assisting us in developing our checklist for LEED and making sure we're getting through all the requirements. The checklist has certain items in it that are prerequisites, which means you don't have a choice in whether or not you undertake that credit. You have to do it to get LEED. And then there are certain ones that you try to get as many credits as you can. Commissioning, the basic level of commissioning, is a prerequisite for LEED. Then there's an enhanced commissioning credit as well, which is elective. But the prerequisite says you have to, at a basic minimum, have the building commissioned.
And is it always a separate entity that does that? Do they have a different level of expertise than you do, or is it just that that was not built into your original contract and therefore it gets bid out subsequently?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things with that. So there, we do provide commissioning services. We did not submit on this project. There's a couple things with that. There's a belief by some that having a different entity go through and look at the design different from the firm that's designing it is a checks and balance on the design of it, the system itself. And so that has sort of having a third party validate the design and provide a commentary on the design itself. And so that's seen as, again, have the advantage of having a third party do that. LEED, in fact, says, well, you can have the same firm do it, but they have to be completely different design professionals that designed it and that commissioned it. But it's a little easier to sort of sort it out by saying, okay, there's a third party that's responsible for commissioning it.
And in our pared back design, we're not changing many of these systems, right?
With all of them, the addition, so even the addition for the Longfellow, which is this, and Reiki, Reiki's probably the smallest, but Longfellow has the pre-K edition on them. They have air handling units dedicated to those spaces. So those would be conditioned, or it would be commissioned as part of our LEED accreditation for those projects. So, but there's also other aspects to LEED, as we talked about, the lighting system, the building security systems, which encompass the entirety of the projects, which aren't just about the small additions that we're doing. So that larger commissioning service extends beyond just the mechanical systems, which are scaled back with our reduced scope that we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Russell Better, please.
Oh, thank you. I just had a short follow-up question, Mark, to Javier's question. I understood your explanation about the checks and balance piece. That made sense to me. And I just wanted to understand in the process of commissioning, when you were explaining kind of checking the efficiencies of the equipment, I wasn't clear. So if in that process things are, are they doing anything to look at, like what then happens? Is it then back to the contractor to do anything to those, since the mechanics of it is not an area that I understand?
Yeah,
but is it, what happens like from what they find, I guess, is my confusion.
Yeah, so sometimes, for instance, what they'll do is they'll look at the controls. Most of the new systems are programmed controls for the equipment, and so what they'll do is they'll have the programmer of the control system change the parameters around the operation of the units themselves, and so that programming, the controls programming, gets modified as the commissioning agent goes through the startup of the equipment. They have a checklist.
So it is the commissioning agent is doing that work when they're...
Commissioning agent is
okay.
Right there. They have the controls contractor beside them as they're going through these. And so it's approached as a team, that the contractor, the commissioning agent, and the controls contractor work together as they get ready to start up the equipment.
Okay, thank you. That
and I know I've got a couple other architects in here, and they can certainly chime in areas that I haven't, Matt and Paul.
I think Paul Stevens would like to weigh in if you're all set, Laura.
Sure. I guess I want to support what Mark is saying 100%. And like Harriman, SMRT also does commissioning. And the people in our office who do that work, that is all that they do. They're experts in this work. And the other thing is that it's very easy for these systems to not be set up correctly. The mechanical systems are way more complicated than they were when I first started practicing architecture. And it's very easy to get things out of whack with them. And this is kind of an obvious one, but this is a number of years ago with a high school that I designed. And we had a situation where a few months into the winter, we couldn't figure out why the heating costs in the school were so high and didn't make any sense based on what our estimates were as to what it should be costing to heat it. Well, what we discovered was that we found that someone had miswired the system for the ventilation for the gymnasium, and it was a huge gym, and it was exhausting all of the heated air out of the gym all winter long. And if we had had commissioning, that would have been discovered before the school opened. So that's just one small example of the kind of thing that you can pick up when you're trying to verify the system before starting it up. But it's a very important thing to do these days.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Dion?
I think this is a prudent strategy. I'll expose my coastie background, but when I listen to you, Mark, this is simply sea trials. You're just taking her out to see if it all works, and the builder's there just to shadow the team that's conducting the sea trials so they can develop protocols and assess the systems that are on board and the vessel's seaworthiness. So it makes sense for a building as much as it makes sense for a ship. So that's how I would explain it to my constituents if they ask me about the cost of that initiative. Thanks. You've given a really good rundown so far.
Thanks, Mark. Any other questions at this time?
I'd only ask that if I can borrow Councilor Dion's explanation for further, for future clients. So
he copyrighted it.
Plagiarize at will, my friend.
Okay, Mark, go ahead.
Very good. So that brings us to next steps. And so as we move through our final stages of the design for Longfellow and subsequently Reiki and Presumpscot, we're finalizing the IT components that go into the and making sure that we've had opportunity to interface with district staff on that. We had one meeting. We're going to have a follow-up on the IT. We've got safety and security meetings established to go through all the different areas with the principals and lead teachers. We've solicited for the clerk of the works, and I think we had a conversation on that, but just briefly, again, the clerk of the works is the eyes and ears for the architect during construction. They're on site daily to observe the construction, record what's happening, and that's very important to ensure that we have a full recording of the events of the contractor during that time. So it's separate from the owner's representative that Steve talked about before with CHA. And as we just talked about, we'll have the workshop with Longfellow on February 23rd with the school board. Then we'll also have a follow-up on March 2nd, which will introduce the workshop on Reiki. At the same time, we're looking for the final vote on the Longfellow to send it out to bid. And then it goes to bid a few days right after that. So as soon as the board approves it, which we hope they will, then we'll advertise to have those documents available to the contractors. We also have next week our marathon BLAC on the 25th, Thursday night. You're all welcome to attend if you want. It'll be a lot of the same material, but we'll be sharing it with the building level advisory committees for the respective schools. And our next meeting with all of you is March 18th, the third Thursday of March. And then this is, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jessica, yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Sorry to jump in here. I'm just wondering, Mark, at the BLAC meeting for Longfellow next week, will you have the more detailed updated budget that shows where all these cost increases were that you were talking about today? Will you have like the more recent cost estimates and then the updated one, just so we can see where all those numbers have changed?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. We started to share some of that with the co-chairs, and we'll try to do it in a way that that doesn't look like just a bunch of Excel charts, because that's hard to follow, but just somehow being able to summarize how the changes have been made over time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you, Mark, to just make sure that the goes out to all the DABC members as well? Okay.
Absolutely. We can put together a memo.
Great. Thank you. Jay Norris?
So, Mark, I'm just curious, as far as the budget goes, it's a great question. I think at this point, we should pretty much, I think, know kind of where the budget's going, but there seems to still be a lot of question marks around that. Does that mean what you're going to provide in a couple of weeks is going to be pretty much set? Is all the fluctuation that we continue to see, that we've seen the last 2 years, is this going to continue because of the markets and because of materials? Or is this continuing to happen because of maybe the contractors you guys are doing or something else? Because it's just seems that we should also be looking at these budgets and the expenditures and maybe a Gantt chart of how the milestones are breaking down per the budget. And we talked about that, a lot, and I still don't really see it. I see these great reports that you guys are doing, but I'm not seeing a lot by way of the bottom line, and that still concerns me. Where are we exactly with the money and what we have to spend and where we're going with the next 2 schools, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Sure. And I'll do the best I can to respond to those points, Jay, that you're asking about. So the Lyseth project, we have, in fact, we identified, we have a bi-weekly meeting with the facilities group. And at our last meeting, we actually went through actual expenditures versus the budget line items and to evaluate just exactly where all that is. And so that was an exercise. We're on track right now to complete the Lyseth project within the established project budget for that school. And with respect to the budgets coming up for the next 3, the variability in costs will continue. The idea that construction costs are variable up until the time that the contractor submits a bid. And so they're going to go through a process of soliciting costs from subcontractors and material suppliers. Those change daily with the market. What we're seeing right now, that most recently with the start of the year, is steel construction costs have escalated significantly to the tune of almost 25%. And so that is a pressure that we've built in an inflationary factor in our estimate. But the question is that enough to compensate? We don't estimate every day. We estimate at milestones throughout the process, but and we build in a contingency to allow for some market fluctuations. But those costs will be variable right up until the time that we get a hard bid from a contractor. And then we're seeing changes in petroleum costs right now, and labor markets change costs rapidly over time as well. So we'll again, we've tracked the Lyseth budget to this point, and we'll continue to track the 3 schools coming up to ensure that we're staying within these budgets.
Jay, you still have the floor. You're okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. So when you say we're coming in on budget, what is that current budget? And forgive me, I've not really been able to track what it is. What is that final amount that we're coming in on, Mark?
Yep. So
go back this.
Yeah, to this point right here, Jay. So the Lyseth project was 16.8 million for the total for the Lyseth, and that's what we're tracking against.
That is what we're coming in at. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jay. You all set?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Javier?
I was just going to ask Mark to come back to this slide to answer Jay's question, because I don't, I know that these numbers have shifted some, but these are the numbers that we are working from. So for each of those projects, that's what's budgeted. And now obviously we are going to bid on those projects, and that's what we will be looking to see whether we can realize what we're trying to realize for those, for those amounts.
Thank you, Javier.
Thank you.
Matthew Lynch?
Thanks, Sarah. This has nothing to do with the budget discussion, but just as we're closing on wrapping up, I wanted to get back to something I thought we were going to talk about in greater detail, which was the Reiki entryway. I guess I was a little surprised that there was no request for discussion about how this committee felt about that design. And it was just all stated towards, well, Reiki is 50-50 on this front entry design. And then we just moved on. So I don't want to suck up any more time than is necessary, but I guess I'm a little baffled by why we didn't talk more in detail about it.
Yeah, I guess, and Matt, I didn't intend at all to sort of rush past it, and I apologize. I think there definitely, I know it's 7:50 now, but I'll make myself available whenever and however to be able to have a further conversation on it.
Mark, we're okay. We can go on
Okay.
now, and then I don't know if Javier wants to interject first or.
Well, just, I think broadly to answer Matthew's question, I think that the reason it wasn't laid out here as a topic was because that is generally the role of the building level advisory committee to sort of weigh in on those types of design specifications. So it doesn't mean that we don't care what you have to say, but it's generally not the purview of the DABC to get into specific design preferences. That's more in the realm of the building level committees.
Matt, you still have the floor.
Sorry, I was muted. That's surprising to me to hear that explanation, because this is a pretty significant change to the design of the building. And I felt there were pretty detailed conversations between this committee as well as the Lyseth BLAC. And frankly, we've talked a lot about decisions that impact design that are more connected to budget. But no, I don't know. This strikes me as an important piece of the project, and I was disappointed to see that there were so many people that wished it wasn't there, because I think it is a nice statement to the front entry of the building, and it gives it an incredible presence on the street front. So I guess it's the architect in me speaking here, but I'm disappointed that it's come up this late and at this stage when you're almost ready to go out to bid. I'll cede the floor.
Board Member Figdor?
Yeah, I'll just say that this element of the design has been kind of at the forefront of the community discussion on the Reiki BLAC for many months now. It's actually the one aspect of the design that there's been quite a lot of back and forth on. And as Mark and I mentioned earlier, there's strong feelings kind of among those on the Reiki BLAC, kind of on both sides. But I would say probably more feedback that the pergola, at least as initially conceived, was kind of imposing and not at the level of elementary school students, and not consistent with the architecture, the neighborhood, and the school. And that's not necessarily my own view. I'm just summarizing the feedback that we've heard over the last few months.
Thank you, Emily. Okay. Any other questions? I'm going to open it up for any questions on anything we've covered this evening that we haven't been able to touch upon that you have a question on. Councillor Ray?
Thanks. I just wanted to say that I am fine with having this discussion take place at the BLAC level, but I am curious, Board Member Figdor, if you have a path forward here, or what you think you might decide with regard to this entry.
Yeah, I think we spoke about it just briefly earlier, that Mark and the folks at Harriman are going to price out what the what the pergola would cost, and then allow the Reiki BLAC to look at the price impacts next to the other other priorities that we have for the renovation. So having that as an initial variable, as a key variable as we weigh whether or not to go forward with it. And Mark, please correct me if that isn't.
No, that's exactly correct. And there's not consensus in a direction from the committee, from the BLAC. There were some that liked it, some that thought there were some values that to it that would be fun, and others that felt strongly that to all the points that Ms. Victor has already mentioned, that it was not fitting for the context of the front of Reiki.
Thank you, and thank you for repeating that for me.
I'm sorry. Did you have anything further? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Okay, sorry about that. Javier?
Just still on the same topic, that Reiki has a long list of alternates, the same as we spent a little bit of time today looking at the Longfellow alternates. We did not look at the Reiki alternates, but the sort of the path forward would be to look at the costs associated with this feature, and for the BLAC to make decisions about whether they would elevate those alternates over the establishment of this entryway.
Thank you very much. So I want to open up any further questions on anything that we covered this evening or that we have not covered that you have a question on.
Can I just remind everyone that I know that Mark has said this a couple of times, but we do have the board will be having a first reading of the recommendation to move to bid with Longfellow, and so that will be that there will be a workshop where, again, to Jessica's question about the budget and all of the how we got to where we are, that will be detailed in that workshop, and then again in the BLAC meeting with the Longfellow BLAC on Thursday. So there will be a couple of opportunities for people to understand, at a deeper level, why the cafeteria is no longer a part of the design.
Thank you. Anything further? We still have 9 minutes. If anyone has anything further they want to ask at this time. Okay, Ms. Marino?
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to touch on what the superintendent just said. So I thought Mark had said the kitchen was still going to be in the construction documents, but it sounds like the superintendent's saying the kitchen's no longer or the cafeteria is no longer in the construction documents. So I just wasn't sure which.
Yes. Yeah, so what? To be clear, and maybe that wasn't clear, Jessica. That it's in the construction documents, but it's an alternate cost because of the amount of it put us significantly over our budget, and so I said there's a strong likelihood that it will not be able to be funded, right, and likely not be constructed.
But it was still in the design pictures that you showed, correct? Or is it still going to be in the design pictures that go out?
So what we're actually showing for the board is we'll show that as a ghosted image, so that we'll show here's what the image looks like with the base bid, and then we'll show an image that has it slightly shaded so that they understand that that's not part of the base bid. And
to sort of to build on that, my understanding is that all of the construction, all of the alternates that would be pieces that would that would be a part of the construction process will be in the documentation, because part of the process is for the contractors to tell us what it would cost for them to do that, so that if there is additional money because one project comes in lower, that then we can look at, what it would cost to add this specific piece to the Longfellow project. So it wouldn't just be that the kitchen cafeteria is in the design documents, but so would the HVAC, the HVAC upgrades, and I can't remember what some of the other alternates, the windows, things along those lines, those would all be in there. Does that make sense, Jess?
Jess, does that answer your question?
It does, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, last call for any further questions. Okay, so we're going to adjourn at 7:25. Next meeting is March 18th, and as Mark and others already mentioned, the BLAC meetings next week, if you'd like to join them. And thank you all for your participation tonight, and appreciate all your help. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.